This video is all on finding definite integrals in calculus. So take a look at your screen. We're going to find the integral of 6x squared plus 3x plus 2 with respect to x. That's what dx means. But in this case, this is called a definite integral because we are given a lower bound and an upper bound. This number at the bottom is what we call the lower bound, and the number on the top is what we call the upper bound. Unlike indefinite integrals where I go to find the antiderivative and I have to always write plus c, in this case we don't need to do that because we're going to be substituting this upper bound and lower bound. Eventually you're going to understand that basically what we're doing is using integration to find areas under the curves. And this lower bound and upper bound, that's exactly what it represents in terms of area under a curve. But for now, we're just practicing how to find this definite integral. So the first thing we have to do is find the antiderivative. So to find the integral, remember the anti-power rule is to add 1, 2 plus 1 is 3, and then divide by that new power. So here, this is going to equal 2x to the third power plus, let's take a look at the next term, 3x. Because I don't see a power, the power that's there is 1. So I'm going to add 1 and divide by that new exponent, which is 2. So I'm going to get plus 3 over 2 x squared. Then the 2, by now, hopefully you know that the antiderivative is 2x. And in case you don't remember why, because when you have a constant by itself, you can add an x to the 0 power. Since x to the 0 power equals 1, 2 times 1 is 2. So I haven't changed the value of the problem. All I'm doing is changing the way it looks. And I do this so that I can go ahead and apply the anti-power rule, which is to add 1 to the power and divide by that new power, which brings me to 2x. And then normally I would have written plus c, but because these are now definite integrals, instead I'm going to draw that long line and I'm going to write down my lower bound and my upper bound. What I have to do next is substitute. I'm going to start by substituting my upper bound. So everywhere where you see an x, you're going to replace the x with that number 3 because that is my upper bound right here. So I'm going to write bracket 2 times 3 to the third power plus 3 over 2 times 3 squared plus 2 times 3, and then I'm going to close the bracket because that right there ends when I substitute the 3. Then I'm going to subtract what I'm going to get when I substitute the lower bound. So I'm going to replace the x with my lower bound, which is now 1. So I'm going to write 2 times 1 to the third power plus 3 over 2 times 1 squared plus 2 times 1. So in this case, all I have to do now is the actual computation. If I do order of operations, I'm going to end up with 2 times 27 because 3 to the third power is 27 plus 3 over 2 times 9 because 3 squared is 9 plus 6 minus 2 times 1 to the third power is still 1 plus 3 over 2, 1 squared is still 1, and then of course 2 times 1 is 2. So I get 54 because 2 times 27 is 54 plus 3 times 9 is 27, so this is 27 over 2, or you can write it as a decimal, 13.5, plus 6 minus 2 plus 3 over 2, or again, you can write that as 1.5 plus 2. So on the left-hand side, if you want to, you can go ahead and put this into your calculator. 54 plus 13.5 plus 6, that's going to give me 73.5 minus, and 2 plus 3 over 2, which is 1.5 plus 2, is going to give me 5.5. So when I subtract 73.5 minus 5.5, my answer is going to be 68. All right, so let's take a look at another example. In this example, I want to find the definite integral of 3x squared minus 2x plus 1 with respect to x. That's what dx means. And in this case, my lower bound is -1 and my upper bound is 2. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start first by finding the antiderivative. 3x squared, you would have to add 1, divide by the new power 3. So we get x cubed. Negative 2x, the x by itself has a 1 as the exponent. So I have to add 1, which makes this 2 divided by 2. I'm going to get minus x squared, because remember the 3's canceled, the 2's have canceled. And then finally, I'm going to get plus x. And I'm going to go ahead and evaluate this from negative 1 to positive 2. So what this means now is that I'm going to be able to substitute the upper bound and subtract what I get when I substitute the lower bound. So I'm going to go ahead and start by replacing this. So this is going to equal, I'm going to create a bracket because the brackets are going to allow me to separate the two operations, okay, the two sets of operations. So I'm going to start replacing this. 2 to the third power minus 2 squared plus 2. That's basically what happens when I go ahead and substitute the upper bound. Minus, it's always minus, you are subtracting. So minus, now let's go ahead and put in a new bracket so that I can go ahead and substitute that negative 1. So negative 1 to the third power minus negative 1 squared plus negative 1. And notice that when I had that positive 2, I didn't really write it in parentheses when I substituted, and that's because it's a positive 2. But when you have a negative number, like here, the negative 1 for the lower bound, I want to make sure that I don't make a mistake. And so it's very important for me to go ahead and put those parentheses. So now I'm going to go ahead and evaluate this. 2 to the third power is 8. 2 squared is 4 plus 2 minus negative 1 to the third power is negative 1 minus from the subtraction. Negative 1 squared right here, a lot of students get this wrong. That is positive 1. So again, I wrote down minus because I brought down the minus from the subtraction. So this is negative 1 minus 1 plus a negative 1, which is technically just another negative 1. So 8 minus 4 is 4. 4 plus 2 is 6 minus negative 1 minus 1 minus 1 is negative 3. So I really have 6 minus negative 3. Negative negative is a positive, so the answer is 9. All right, so this is going to be our last example for this video. If you want, go ahead and pause the video so that you can try this one on your own to see if you get it correct. In this case, we want to find the integral of 4x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5x minus 7 with respect to x, and the lower bound is 0 and the upper bound is 2. So when I go ahead now and I find the antiderivative, I add 1, which is 4, divide by 4. The 4's cancel. I get x to the fourth power minus, add 1. 2 plus 1 is 3, divide by 3. So minus 2/3, x to the third power. Here, if you don't see an exponent, it is 1 because I do see an x. So x to the 1 power, I add 1, divide by 2. I get plus 5 over 2x squared minus the 7 is going to be 7x, and I want to evaluate this from 0 to 2. So let's go ahead and start by substituting the x with 2. I'm going to get 2 to the fourth power minus 2/3 times 2 to the third power plus 5/2 times 2 squared minus 7 times 2 minus, then my lower bound happens to be 0. Because my lower bound is 0, I have an x everywhere. I have a feeling that all of that is just going to give me 0. 0 to the fourth power minus 2/3 times 0 to the third plus 5/2 times 0 squared minus 7 times 0. So here on the left-hand side, 2 to the fourth power means 2 times 2, which is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2, 16. So this is 16 minus 2/3 times 2 to the third power is 8 plus 5/2 times 2 squared is 4 minus 14. And sure enough, 0 to the fourth power is 0. 0 to the third power times negative 2/3 is 0. 0 squared times 5/2 is 0. And negative 7 times 0 is 0. So this whole part right here is just 0. That's going to make my life a little bit easier. So now I only have to worry about this left-hand side. So I get 16 minus 16 over 3 plus 2 goes into 4 2 times, so this is 10 minus 14. And if you put all of this into your calculator, it's going to give you 20/3, and that's going to be our final answer. I hope you found this video helpful. Remember to subscribe to my channel for more help with math so that you can say, yes, I can do math with confidence. Until next time, thanks for watching.